Hello, Janksters, and welcome to another edition of the MagicJank podcast, the weekly show where members of Team MagicJank get together and we talk about the latest happenings in Magic the Gathering. We're a little late coming to you this week, but thank you for your patience. We do appreciate it. Scheduling is what it is, but as a result, we have more Aetherdrift preview cards to talk with you about, and that's going to be the show. We're going to dive deep on Aetherdrift, and I'm not going to do it alone, which I'm excited about because I'm going to be joined by the one and only Carlo C. Ferreira Jr. How are we doing, man?
Doing good. It's been a hell of a week, but it's okay. Busy, very busy week. Lots of Magic news. Lots of Magic news. And listen, we even learned, even though like the last weekly MTG stream was all about Aetherdrift, they did announce at the end that we're going to start to see some Final Fantasy stuff in a couple of weeks. Just to dip our toes in the water right before MagicCon Chicago. Do you know about MagicCon Chicago?
Wait, MagicCon is coming to Chicago? What?
It is. Wow. It's coming the week of February 21st.
That's wild. Man, I'm gonna have to find a way to get a badge and a hotel and a meet and greet scheduled. If only there was some way. Crazy. That is to say, come meet us at MagicCon Chicago. We'll be there. It's gonna be a lot of fun, you guys.
Yes.
Yes, I will be there. It's gonna be a blast. Oh. And I'll make sure that we bring plenty of Sharpies for our meet and greet time.
Yes.
Turns out those are hot items. Let me tell you what. Yeah.
Last time I lost Ham Hocks markers. So just
it happened. This is one of those things that does happen at conventions that you all need to be aware of. Come with multiple like dry erase markers. Be ready for them because like when you're playing Commander with the Infinite tokens, they are all around. You will lose at least one dry erase marker throughout the process of playing games. It does happen. You may lose two or three. However, the inverse of that is also true. You might walk home with an Exmo marker in some color that you never picked out. It happens. The exchange of markers is just part of the deal. We don't talk about it, but it happens. It's real. Anyway, so be ready. Anyway, don't be too attached. But things that I'm attached to anyway is Aetherdrift previews. So when they announced at this point, I don't know, what was it, a year ago, 2 years ago, and they're like, we're doing a Death Race set, my immediate reaction was, what? Are you kidding? And I've been trying to go in with an open mind, but the more of these cards I see, the happier I am and the more I like it. I gotta say. And I'm not just saying that because, I'm an ambassador this time around. It's genuinely my reaction. Like this, I think this set is going to play very, very well. And the number of like wackadoo crazy I dare you build arounds that we've seen so far is kind of through the roof. And I'm very eager to try them. So I don't know if there's anything you want to talk about before we just dive right on into it, but we got plenty of cards, man.
Just that, same thing I would tell anybody for any new Magic set that comes out. Look at the set with an open mind, right? Because, like, half the time I feel like sometimes the Magic players, you look at a set and you're like, this is meh, right? Mm-hmm. Or, like, you'll be like me and I'll be looking at, like, comments on, like, Magic's Twitch page when they do the weekly MTG streams. And it's like a bunch of negativeness. And honestly, for no reason. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Every Magic product is not necessarily going to be for everybody. That isn't my opinion on Aetherdrift. I think Aetherdrift's absolutely fantastic. I also think the majority of Magic sets are fantastic. So, I mean, True. My comment might kind of be based. But, like I said, no matter the set, go into it with an open mind, because let me tell you, the story was like kind of off the charts this time in terms of the Magic lore. I feel like if you read the lore, the set would draw you in a bit more, right? Because even though it is advertised as like a death race, it's kind of more of like a fun kind of race story, and you get to learn some background of some of the characters that we've seen on other planes. So like Winter, for example, went from being like a Jund creature in Dustmourne to a Dimir creature in Aetherdrift, right? So you get to learn about how the Omen paths like are changing some of the characters, right? And how Winter is actually working to try to get Valgavoth to be able to escape Duskmourn by using the Aether Spark. So if you're wondering, like, what the heck did you think that Valgavoth was like one of the big bads in the story? Well, the answer is yes. But
100%.
now we know that Winter is working for Valgavoth and with other demons. Hey
Mm-hmm.
yo. So we have up on the screen for those of you who are watching on YouTube the spoiler of Winter's card, which is Winter Cursed Rider. For a blue and a black, you get a 3/2 with Ward, pay 2 life, and artifacts you control have Ward, pay 2 life, which is pretty cool. And then we have the exhaust mechanic on it. So
Mm-hmm.
exhaust is basically an extra cost, aka kicker, that you can pay one time when the creature is on the battlefield or the card is on the battlefield. This one in particular says 2, a blue and a black to tap, exile X artifact cards from your graveyard. Each other non-artifact creature gets -X/-X until the end of turn. So it's pretty interesting that there's sort of the pseudo wrath spell on
Mm-hmm.
Winter, who is super protected and protects your other artifacts, um,
Yeah.
which
It's
is fitting because Aetherdrift is based a set based on a lot of artifacts/vehicles. So it
absolutely.
protects your vehicles and stuff like that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, well, and I love the talking about the lore implications. We have kind of a question of, okay, why is Winter working for Valgavoth? And there's this presumption, because if I recall correctly, in the Duskmourn story, he was a rather sympathetic kind of anti-hero character who was ultimately on the side of the good guys. But now he's clearly championing the bad guy, and so you can't help but wonder why. And the general consensus seems to be this belief that he believes if he can get Valgavoth off of Duskmourn, then he himself can be granted freedom, so the ability to leave Duskmourn without an entourage of demons who will like swallow his soul if he tries to escape, presumably.
Right.
And so he himself wants his own freedom, and if he has to set free this gigantic demonic monster on the multiverse in order to do it, well, he's had to deal with this guy already, so whatever. It can be somebody else's turn for a
Right.
change, which is really fitting for a black aligned character. Like I like that. It's cool. It's
Yeah.
interesting, and it doesn't mean like he's still a sympathetic character for the most part. Like I can understand
Mhm.
that motivation. I don't hate him for it,
Yeah.
even if I don't want him to succeed. So it's interesting, and I say that to kind of get to the point of the for being a silly kind of trope of a set, the Aetherdrift story was shockingly good. I
Yeah.
mean, okay, I'm not surprised that Kay Arsenal Rivera brought it
Oh
with
yeah.
those mainstream stories. I mean, of
She's
course,
amazing.
she's a phenomenal writer, no question about it. But like the actual like plot beats, the actual moments, like all the characters kind of made sense. It was understandable, and it was far better than it had any right to be. Which is Anyway, it was great. So
Yeah.
if you haven't read those stories, I highly recommend it. I actually have a couple side stories I still need to carve out some time for, but the actual race itself, it wasn't, when you think of Death Race, you think of almost this like Mad Max crazy nonsense kind of thing, but it felt just like a very believable kind of sports story
Yeah.
almost, which was
And
really just delightful.
honestly, I got a bunch of different like feels based on the different teams that you got to to learn about.
Hmm.
For example, we have in the Is It colors like the shark humanoid team, and
Yes.
they certainly are very much different than sort of the creatures that I would think embody like Mad Max.
Right.
Um, we talked about you know, it was the last group. I'll remember their name in just a
Oh, the
moment.
Speed Demons. Yeah.
Well, the Speed Demons are Winter's group,
Yes.
right?
And the
Um,
pirates are the keel haulers. Yeah.
yes, yes, yes. And
Yeah.
so the one that embodied the Mad Max sort of like theme to me was the End Riders.
Yup.
Those who were trying to basically to escape their plane,
Mm-hmm.
and they keep running out of fuel, so they keep going to different planes through the Omen Pass to just keep riding for the sake of riding.
Dude,
And
oh.
this group, in Rakdos colors, embodies like the Mad Max theme,
Oh yeah.
where you're talking about the keel haulers and the shark pirates being very clearly different.
Mm-hmm.
Even the Elacrian Quick Beast, that is the Selesnya group that is
Mm-hmm.
on Aetherdrift, they utilize mounts rather than vehicles. So they are friends with their mounts, and we saw mounts
Mm-hmm.
last on Outlaws of Thunder Junction. And if I remember correctly, Outlaws of Thunder Junction wasn't originally designed with mounts, so maybe they had taken what was
Mm-hmm.
originally designed for Aetherdrift and moved some of them over thematically so they would meld to be in the same
Yeah.
standard rotation together, and that totally makes sense by looking at the cards. Um, but yeah, I think each of these different teams makes it so it was less around sort of this Mad Max theme and more focused around different themes about racing and getting like the
Mm-hmm.
teams to work together, right? I mean, the champions of Amonkhet literally are the living and the dead working together, right? On a
Yep.
plane that was ravaged by Nicobolas, in more ways than one. And we even get to see new gods in this set,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Or returning gods or something like this. But yeah,
Oh
the
my
story
goodness.
was off the chain,
It was
and
amazing. Yeah.
um, I'm excited to see, what ends up happening in the end and how we're going to take it
Mm-hmm.
from here and then move on to what will be the Tarkir set in a couple months.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just it works. And you might think this might sound like we're talking through a lot of different like disparate ideas and how do you fit them all into one story? Well, I think the fact that there's such crazy disparate ideas and the general vibe and aesthetic of every single racing team being so dramatically different
Yeah.
really shows and illustrates the way the multiverse has changed as a result of the Omen Paths opening up. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, of course they're all completely different. All of these teams are coming from completely different worlds, not just like different cultures, the like completely different universes. Like, it's wild to think about. And so they all have different motivations, they all have different ideals, and they all have a different way to achieve
Hmm.
the speed that they have to use in order to win the Aether Spark ultimately. Yeah, it's fantastic. So we can get into getting into the cards themselves. Let's talk about the Aether Spark itself, like the prize
Yeah.
for winning this race that has brought people from all kinds of disparate worlds to travel through three separate planes. In order in a multi-day race,
Yeah.
in order to achieve it, like what prize could be worth that? Well, the Aether Spark itself, in the lore, it's a synthetic planeswalker spark, right? Which has all
Yeah.
kinds of crazy implications, and I'm very curious to see what happens moving forward. Because
Yeah.
whoever wins it, this technology exists now, right? Like somebody on Avishkar made this. So what does that mean? I don't know. We'll see, and I'm interested to
Yeah.
find out. But we have one now, and it is a legendary artifact planeswalker equipment. Which how many more type lines could we get on this?
I can think of a few.
It's wild. So it is
Yeah.
so it's a 4 mana, one of all those things I just said, and it starts with 4 loyalty, and it's a planeswalker by itself. It just sits on the
Yeah.
battlefield as a planeswalker, and as long as the Aether Spark is attached to a creature, it can't be attacked. And has whenever equipped creature deals combat damage during your turn, you put that many loyalty counters on the Aether Spark.
Yep.
And then there are 3 loyalty abilities. +1, attach the Aether Spark to up to one target creature you control. Put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. -5, draw 2 cards, which that's just good. And then -10, add 10 mana of any one color. All right. As our resident Planeswalker expert, Carlo, what do you think about this? What are your feelings?
I mean, I think the card is okay. I don't think it's like snap 100% broken planeswalker card.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One main reason is because it doesn't well, it does protect itself, right? Because as the clause that says that it can't be attacked um
Mm-hmm.
when it's attached to a creature though. So you can't play this. You can play it for 4 mana, but then there's no like plus or minus like generate a token to sort of protect it. I
Mm-hmm.
suppose you can consider the +1 ability to be attached to a creature. So again, that is all determined upon you having a creature out in the battlefield. And
Right.
then your ultimate goal with the Aether Spark is to try to put as many loyalty counters on it as you can to activate its other abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know, if you can eventually get up to -10 to add 10 mana of any one color to your mana pool, that has very large implications, right? Because let's say I have a creature on the battlefield, and turn 4 I cast the Aether Spark, and I plus, and I attach it, let's say, to a 3-power creature. The 3-power creature becomes a 4-power creature with the ability. I attack, I deal damage, 4 loyalty go on Aether Spark. So you're talking about it going from 5 to 9 loyalty, which doesn't get you to the -10 right away. But -5ing the draw 2 cards, attacking with the creature, adding 4 more loyalty the next turn seems fine. We're all assuming that your creature survives here in a standard format full of spot removal and different types of spot removal. That being said, I think this card will shine mostly in equipment variant decks. So like there's always been this kind of playable but like C tier Boros equipment deck in standard, right? That's taking advantage of like Astor, which can tutor up the Aether Spark for you. Kembaka for 2 mana that can auto equip things for you. These same decks get to play Blade something
War
War Whip.
Yeah.
That card.
Yeah.
That gives the equipped creature double strike, right? And that has living weapon on it. So all your living weapon artifacts from Phyrexia all will be one get better, I think, with the Aether Spark. But do remember that standard will rotate in September, right? Beginning of September. So those sets leave standard, making this more difficult to kind of play with. But I think that's where its home really is going to be. Now, you could be fun like me, and you could play Yargle and Multani, and that thing's an 18-6. So if I put Aether Spark on it, I immediately make Yargle Multani a 19-7 attack and put 19 counters on Aether Spark, because it doesn't say that it has to deal combat damage to a player. You could block with your 1/1, and I still get 19 loyalty counters on my Aether Spark. Now let me take it one step further. Why can't we play All Will Be One in the same deck? And then when 19 counters get put onto the Aether Spark, you take 19 to the face.
That seems good. Yeah. That seems pretty good.
That's the type of jank that just like goes through my head, you know.
And and right there, you're laying out a couple of really fun and interesting, expensive cards. Where like, yeah, if you can play that, that's awesome. But like in standard, I just don't think that's going to be, you know, it's going to be very difficult to pull off. Let me just put it out. It's going to be very difficult to pull off. I'm 100% on board with all of this. Like, you know, with All Will Be One, I've seen people using All Will Be One alongside like the new 9 Lives Familiar, and like that's fun. But it's a little slow, you know, so like getting it there is just tricky. Or, you know, All Be One in the freaking Millennium Calendar. You know, again, super fun, great idea. And Yargle Multani, I remember that alongside Ziatora or other like fling effects, like the frog fling. We all nobody, who doesn't love good frog fling? And so any way to supercharge that, okay, cool. We're gonna have fun with it. But You're touching on all the right points with this, and I completely agree with everything you just said. Like, the jank potential for, like, goofy, fun value is absolutely here, and that's delightful. But I think bottom line, I don't believe it's going to be competitive, and I think of one a really clear reason why is that it costs a loyalty ability to equip. And so if you have to use the loyalty ability in order to equip it, then even if you throw a whole bunch of loyalty counters on it, you can't activate it again until your next turn. And it gives your opponent plenty of time to interact with it. You know, and this is an individual card that dies to anything that can kill a planeswalker, which, you know, Get Lost is a 4 of all over the place right now. Yeah. And it also dies to everything that can destroy an artifact, which we don't have a lot of, you know, people main decking Abrade right now, but if artifacts become more popular, that will change. And, you know, Abrade and Untimely Malfunction are standard legal, like, so if people come packing artifact removal, there's no way this thing is going to live long enough to keep going, which is where I think the ability to equip it with other abilities is so important. So Astor gives it the equipped 1 ability, you know, so you could activate an equip ability to throw it onto something, get into combat, deal some damage, get a bunch of loyalty, and then maybe even hit that -10, get your 10 mana post combat, and then go crazy. Like, if you can do that kind of thing, you know, and Kemba being able to auto equip, usually that's on cards that are coming into play, and I don't know if you're giving them haste in some way, but regardless, one thing that I know I want to do on this, I don't think it's reasonable, but I really want to equip this onto a Ball Lightning. I just think that'd be fun. I don't know why that was the first place I went, but like, That's just neat.
Yeah.
But the floor on this is also just sort of a bad innkeeper's talent, because the +1 is putting a counter on something. So, like, that's not nothing, but,
Yeah.
it's that alone isn't worth 4 mana,
Yeah. And
generally speaking.
the Selesnya cards in this set, the Elocrian crew, they mostly focus on +1/+1 counter synergies, which also really line up with the Lost Caverns of Ixalan Selesnya cards that also cared about +1/+1 counter synergies. So, who knows? Maybe there's some like Selesnya deck that rises up from this that isn't the Collector's Cage variant that
Right.
maybe can utilize like 2 copies of this card
Maybe.
in their deck. It's just a way for, the Selesnya deck that traditionally runs out of gas after you curve out as just a way to keep drawing cards.
Yeah, actually, if you can consistently get that -5, I mean, and if you have it attached to a reasonably large creature, maybe it's a bunnycorn or something that's attacking regularly and getting in for a lot of damage. If your opponent doesn't answer it, you can be drawing 2 extra cards every turn. I mean, that would be pretty fantastic. So, yeah, okay, all right. Maybe I'm coming around to this. I don't know. I'm interested to give it a try. I don't think it's going to be super competitive, but it's an interesting idea. Yeah.
For my commander enjoyers, if you have Nicol Bolas, Dragon God out.
There you go. Well, the other actual one that I've seen some people mention is Ichor Moon Gauntlet, because it would give the Aether Spark the -12 ability to take an extra turn after this one. So if you have it on a large enough creature, if you have it on a Yargle Multani that is able to attack every turn, you just have infinite attacks with Yargle.
Infinite extra turns.
You with Yargle Multani, like
yeah. I hear you.
It's very silly.
You're saying
but
Sultai,
Sultai Aether
color
Spark.
with, sure, okay.
Why not?
I'm down.
Yeah. Yeah, go all 5 color, get Astor in there too. Yeah, screw it. Let's see what happens. It's I'm on board. This is fun.
Yeah, you know what is also interesting is the other Planeswalker in this set.
Yeah.
Which is Chandra Spark Hunter.
If you're looking for an alternative marketplace online for Magic the Gathering singles and sealed products, I have great news for you. MagicJank.com is an online marketplace for people who love all Magic the Gathering has to offer, even the jankier bits. Join the MagicJank marketplace with your own storefront. Whether you're a small business or a hobbyist with more bulk lying around than you'd like, MagicJank.com can help your products reach new customers who love the game as much as you do. Now let's get back to the episode. Chandra back, everybody.
Now, interestingly enough, it says, so Chandra costs 4 mana, 3 colorless and a red, 4 loyalty. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose up to 1 target vehicle you control until the turn becomes an artifact creature and gains haste, so animates the vehicles every turn. And then you can +2 to sacrifice an artifact or discard a card. If you do, draw a card. You can pay 0 loyalty to create a 3/2 vehicle artifact token with Crew 1. Or its ultimate -7 says you get an emblem that whenever an artifact you control enters, this emblem deals 3 damage to any target. So this is the first time we've seen sort of like an artifact reliant version of Chandra, if I'm not mistaken, right? Traditionally, Chandra in the past has cared about like doing some type of form of non-combat damage or copying spells.
She's had some elemental synergies in the past, but it's always been magic burn, dealing damage. And so this is the first one I can think of that has a very heavy artifact theme to it. Yeah.
Which makes sense, like given lore-wise, right? Chandra is involved in the Girapur Grand Prix. Chandra is on her own team, not on her mother's team. Which is a challenge in the storyline itself, right?
Yep.
Chandra's fighting for the Aether Spark to try to give it to Nissa, so Nissa's Planeswalker Spark can be restored. That's the whole goal here, and she's working with all of these vehicles and artifact synergies. So it's interesting. I don't know how to rate this Planeswalker, though, to be honest. Because in the past, Duretti has been our red-based artifact Planeswalker, or something that has to do with artifact synergies. And Duretti is an Aetherdrift and is desparked and has a creature card. And does the artifact-based strategy as a creature. So it's interesting that we see Chandra doing something completely different, which, hey, Planeswalkers doing something completely different than they used to in the lore isn't out of the question, right? I think it's actually good for like character evolution in terms of like talking about Chandra as a character in Magic. Um, but I don't know how I feel about the card.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think it does what Planeswalkers should be doing, and that is having a mode that protects itself. It doesn't do that. It makes a 3/2 colorless vehicle with crew 1, so you have to crew it. And the only way you get to animate that creature is on your turn during combat, turning it into the creature.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't stay a creature. It turns back to being the vehicle. So,
Yeah.
you know, granted, it does start with 4 loyalty for 4 mana, and its
Mm-hmm.
first ability does +2 to 6 to let you rummage or sack an artifact to draw a card. So you can get it to its ultimate in 2 turns, which is powerful if you were playing an artifact-based deck, right?
Sure.
So thinking about that in standard, the only thing that really comes to my mind in terms of like good playable artifact decks are like the Simulacrum synthesizer decks, which right now are like kind of B tier in standard. Like they
Mm-hmm.
exist, but they're not doing quite well. So like, do you play a non-artifact card in Chandra to try to get its ultimate off? So that way, when you make a creature off of Simulacrum synthesizer, you get to deal 3 damage to any target. Do you play something similar to what we saw with the Lost Cavern of Ixalan artifacts that is playing like Market Gnome on 1,
Right.
Spring Saw Blades on 2, the Clay Bricks card to search for
Oh,
planes to
sure.
put in your hand
Yep.
to make sure you hit your curve out. Um, you could play Wrath spells in this deck, right? The Glyph Bridge, Unstable Bridge on 5. All of that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense to me in a Chandra deck. So you got to try to fit red in all of that. Whereas typically that strategy is like blue white based. Um,
Right.
so it's interesting. It's an interesting card.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm on board with everything you're saying. I don't know that I don't know that she has a home that exists right now.
Mhm.
Synthesizer's interesting, and I also think this is not going to be the last time we talk about Simulacrum Synthesizer today, because that card is one that has been just, it is absolutely insane in just what it can do. But it hasn't really found a home in standard. It just doesn't quite have the foundation. Like, I understand people are running it in modern to decent success, because of just the sheer power level. We just need
More
to surround it
strategies.
with
Yep.
some power. Well, this set has a whole mess of artifacts in it. So I have a sneaking suspicion that, like, be on the lookout for this thing in standard in the near future. I think its time is coming. And it's interesting if
Yep.
Chandra would be a piece of that, because we ultimately want a deck that is putting a ton of artifacts on the field, and maybe one that would benefit from being able to produce another vehicle every turn. But like, if Chandra makes the vehicle and is able to attack with a 3-power creature the turn that she comes in, okay, that's neat. And she also has the ability to, animate, kind of crew any other vehicle that you might have lying around. So if you have powerhouse vehicles, okay, maybe there's some kind of opportunity there. But in general, I look at this card and she reminds me a ton of Koth from Obi-Wan. And not just in the general templating, although that's
Yeah.
absolutely, 4 mana, Red Walker, +2, good ult at 7. Like, a lot of the same beats are being hit here. And
Yeah.
Koth is a card that I like. I like that card a lot. But it's just a little too slow for the current standard, and like, good
Yeah.
red decks are so fast if they don't have 4 mana walkers, like, it would just slow
Mhm.
them down. And I fear that that's the same case here. With red planeswalkers, there's kind of a tension and kind of an issue there. So
Yeah.
I don't imagine there's any mono red deck that wants Chandra, but maybe there's some kind of Is It Artifacts deck, in the
Yeah.
future that can leverage, maybe Crime Novelist and, Detective
Mm.
Satchel. Then maybe that package, maybe
Yeah.
there'll be some variant of that, and she could be a really cool, like, 2 of in that deck to really deliver the kill shot if somebody's not paying attention.
Mhm.
Give them another threat to answer. Like, that kind of an idea in a mid-rangey deck could be interesting. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm interested, and being able to +2 sacrifice an artifact and just Yeah, being able to sack artifacts and just draw cards with the +2. Like, if you have Power Stone tokens or map tokens lying around, like,
Yeah, it's true.
that's great. So I don't know.
And speaking of like the big vehicles, like if you have any other big vehicles on the battlefield, and even though I just touched on like playing the Clay Bricks card and
Mm-hmm.
playing like Market Gnome, the big vehicle of the set that comes to my mind is Valor's Flagship, which is a mythic in this set. Um, Granted, it is 4 and triple white.
Yep.
But it is a 7/7 flying first strike lifelink that has crew
Whew.
3
Yep.
and cycling X2 white, that when you cycle it, you make X1/1 colorless pilot creature tokens that can crew as though they had an extra power. So they can crew up to crew 2 each. And so just my brain thinking for a moment here, right? Like playing those sort of rampy artifacts that you can in white,
Mm-hmm.
right? Being able to play that alongside and automatically animate with Chandra. There also might be the chance that you just like bin this card, and
Yep.
you're able to reanimate it. Today, as of the recording of this
Mm-hmm.
podcast, they did reveal a white uncommon card. Um, it is called Tune Up. It's 3 and a white. It's an uncommon sorcery. Return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield. If it's a
Amazing.
vehicle, it becomes an artifact creature. So this works incredibly well if you're going to do that type of a strategy. You can always pitch the Valor's Flagship to Chandra's ability to draw a card, and then cast Tune Up and reanimate the flagship as a creature on turn 4. And it
Dang.
stays an artifact creature in this regards, right? It never turns
Yeah.
back to the vehicle. So, well, technically it's a vehicle, but it doesn't turn back into being just a vehicle. And so on turn 4, if you are just like discarding it via another means, like Bitter Reunion, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
you can tune up on turn 4, get 7/7, really big creature that can't be go for the throated because it's an artifact,
Yep.
which is kind of important. Or you can cast it a turn later after you've established Chandra, and you use Chandra as your discard engine. Or the ability to be able to animate this outside of crew once
Mm-hmm.
a turn. So there might be some type of synergy here.
I like that a lot. Yeah. Also, tune up. That is, I ran refurbish a ton in
Yeah,
the past, and this is just that, but better. Yeah,
yeah,
amazing. Yeah, I'm here for it. That's fantastic. Yeah, and Valor's Flagship is a good call out. It's the kind of card where if you're just hoping to cast it fairly, you better be running a ton of control.
hmm
But those opportunities to reanimate it or cheese it out in some way or another, and then
and
Chandra
it can
being able
and it
to
can discard
animate this, and
itself.
it can you can cycle this on 3 into tune up on 4. Like, that's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah, amazing. No, that's awesome, and it's straight up Decree of Judgment. I don't know if yeah. You
justice,
guys,
decree of
Justice?
justice.
It
Yeah,
was Justice. Yeah, that one. The White Decree from back in the day.
yeah,
Which has been downshifted to uncommon. Oh, how they murdered my
yeah.
boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just. But yeah, Decree of Justice from back in the
The
day. It cycles
decrees
for
used to be
3, and when you
so powerful.
they
This is a
were they
win
were
condition like
nuts.
super old blue-white control too.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, Decree of Justice was classic. So it's that, but a boat.
Yeah.
So nothing but love there. That's awesome. I dig it. Good stuff. So yeah, those could definitely work alongside New Chandra, I think, to pretty good effect. Also, just I gotta just touch on kind of the aesthetics of this for a second. Chandra is unapologetically, what is it, Kaneda from Akira? Like, they're
hmm
absolutely, like, the shot for shot, like, the artwork is just her doing the slide in the rain, which is just the
Yeah.
movie poster from Akira, and the token vehicle that it makes is like her walking up to the bike. It's kind of like it's wild. Anyway,
Yeah, and
so
and talking about the artwork just for a minute in
yeah.
this set. I mean, the artwork is
Oh,
incredible.
yeah.
Like the artist and the art direction coming from like these last couple sets has been absolutely fantastic.
On
Um,
point.
there's also this thing called the Japan Showcase artwork treatments that they have done for the last couple sets now, and Chandra has one, and it's absolutely stunning. Um,
Oh yeah,
it comes in. There we go, Chandra Spark
yeah.
Hunter.
We got it for the video. Yeah, yeah.
Where these cards are drawn in anime style or a particular style from a Japanese artist.
Mm-hmm.
They have special borders. You can get them in English and Japanese out of collector packs. You can even get them as fracture foil cards. So they're super sparkly. And you know, if you're the person like me who likes super sparkly cards for the commander decks, this is definitely a spot for you.
Heck yeah.
And super sparkly planeswalkers just seem like a good time. So you know, I hope that I can pick up a copy of this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it looks absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I think the card looks great. Honestly, if there's so I'm definitely going to keep an eye out, you know, in Chicago if anyone is selling like a blacklight poster of this cuz that's where I want to see this art.
Yeah.
Cuz yeah, that's it's yeah, lovely. Absolutely fantastic. I especially love like the flame borders. Like it has a quasi kind of graffiti style to it, which a number of the
Yeah.
artwork has. Which it's funny because you know I associate that kind of aesthetic with like skateboarding and kind of a punk vibe.
Hmm.
But in this set, it still fits. Like it still works
Yeah.
because some of the you know, when it comes to racing, like some of the racing crews, like the Cloudspire racing team, which is the team that Chandra is working with, they're super high tech, super efficient, very professional, and very focused. But at the same time, you have, you know, the what is it, the end runners or end riders, the folks
Riders.
who
Hmm.
are just they clearly are just cobbling together their machines with duct tape and spit
Yeah.
and just hoping it'll work. And I don't know, for some reason the kind of punk graffiti work or art it
Yeah.
works and it's great. I love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, I will tell you just from seeing some of the graffiti art, like I think when I saw the first card that they had previewed that had this artwork, um, I like didn't know how to feel about it.
Yeah.
I saw like the Bulwark Ox card
Mm.
as like the first graffiti style card in the gold border, and um, I was like, is this something that I like? Like, I just wasn't sure. I wasn't
Oh,
knocking it as being
this guy?
bad. Yeah, that's Bulwark Ox. So Bulwark Ox, by the way, is rare. It
Yes.
costs one and a white. It's a 2/2 Ox Mount, and it says whenever this creature attacks while saddled, you put a counter on target creature, and you can sacrifice this creature to give creatures you control with counters on them hexproof and indestructible to end a turn. So, you know, this is definitely going into your green white counters matter deck,
Mm-hmm.
alongside some ornery tumblewag, likely.
100%.
Because these cards seem to meld very well together.
Mm-hmm.
Probably some bristly bill and doubling of +1/+1 counters, you know what I mean? Because these cards work really well with the Outlaws of Thunder Junction cards too.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and so A+ on set design and standard design based on the
Yep.
cards and when they're coming out. But I didn't know how to feel about this type of art because I was like, yeah, this like kind of looks cool, but I don't know if I'm 100% into it. I mean, take a look. You got this ox with some really bulging eyes and
Yep.
teeth, and it doesn't look like an ox, but here we are. And it kind of looks like to me, and forgive me for those of you who are Naruto fans, this looks like Appa to me, but without flying, but it kind of looks like it's flying in the image.
A
So
little bit
that's the
like it's
first thing that like came to my mind. So
oh
I
my
don't know if
goodness.
that was like inspiration for this art, but it just brought me back to thinking about that, but with bulging eyes and large human-looking teeth.
Yeah,
Um,
if Rat Fink did an Appa portrait, this is what you get. Yeah.
yeah.
Amazing.
And so I got to see that, and so like I said, I was unsure. And then they showed us more of the graffiti style.
Mm-hmm.
So the card I'm looking for here is Draconautics Engineer. It is a red card. Um, Draconautics Engineer. It's a Goblin
Yeah.
Artificer, and the graffiti Goblin cards are where it
Perfect.
slaps
So good.
because we've seen so many depictions of goblins in the past. You
Mm-hmm.
know, from your traditional goblins that I grew up with in Scourge block. I know there were
Yep.
goblins before that, y'all, but I started playing Magic in 8th edition, so I was
Mm-hmm.
introduced to goblins while playing Standard and getting destroyed by Goblin Pile Driver and Goblin
Dude,
Sharpshooter. So that's my first recollection
yes.
of goblins in this game.
Those are very
Um,
memorable goblins. Yep.
you know, and so you think about like the goblins that we saw in Ixalan, that were largely like Ragavan looking base. They had like lots of like blue skin or fur, white fur that we really hadn't seen goblins in that regard before. And I know Ragavan's not a goblin, but the goblins on Ixalan look like Ragavan, kind of.
Yeah, but if you look at like
kind of.
Breeches, for example,
Yeah,
he's
Breeches,
one of
there
the,
you go. Yeah.
he's an Ixalan goblin who's just he's just a monkey, but
Yes.
you know they're
Yeah.
they're very kind of simian in the way they look, which is a fun little take, but it's a very different style of goblin. Yeah.
And so you look at this goblin art on the graffiti artwork, and it just makes me think of like Gremlins or something like this. And it's sweet because they are some wacky looking goblins. And you take a look at the regular goblin art from this set too, and they look like some hot rod goblin creatures. Like they are ready to go. You know, and they're ready to do damage, and they don't care if somebody gets hurt, and they're all just trying to boost and ride and do some damage. So it all looks fantastic, and you know, goblins riding on dinosaur dragons wasn't on my bingo card for 2025, but here we are.
Yeah. The normal artwork for Draconautics Engineer, it is a goblin that has tied themselves to the head of a dragon with like a Wile E. Coyote style jetpack attached to its back. Like, what is going on here? Like, I don't know, but it's silly and I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it feels very much like those old school Dominaria goblins that were always blowing themselves up and getting into wacky hijinks.
Yeah.
Like, they have always been this, like, Looney Tunes cartoon happening in the middle of a very serious story. And I've always loved them for that. And they're definitely, the Gruul goblins in this set are just absolutely carrying that torch like absolute champions. I love it. Oh.
Yeah, so the art is on point in
Nailed it.
These cards. You know, another thing.
Well, and on that note, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Redshift, the Rocketeer Chief.
Yes,
this guy,
yes.
He's the main goblin in that crew. And actually, it reminds me. This artwork reminded me very much of another streamer named Gazbang Goblin, who is a VTuber who has a full-on like goblin thing going on with goggles and the whole works. It's just straight up a very similar character, and I just absolutely adore it. But Redshift Rocketeer Chief is a 2/3 goblin pilot for red-green with vigilance. I mean, we're already working with a 2/3 goblin with vigilance for 2. Okay.
Yeah.
And then tap, add X mana of any one color where X is Redshift's power. Spend this mana only to activate abilities. And then they have an exhaust ability for 10 red-green. Put any number of permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield.
Sounds great.
So...
it sounds like a fun card. I don't know how good enough that this card will be for a standard.
No.
Of course, you can always play like combat tricks on it to raise its power. You know, the Gruul decks already do this with like Giant Growth and Monstrous Rage, and the red card that gives them Manifest Dread if the creature dies, +2/+0, +3/+0, and it's 1 red. That all works on Redshift, but then afterwards you don't really have permanents in your hand to put on the battlefield.
No.
Because your opponent should be dead by the time you cast all of those cards.
Ideally, yeah.
I mean, I will say, you know, what really hurts this card is it not having haste. So maybe if you had a way to give it haste and attack and then be able to tap for mana after the fact to cast a bigger creature, might be worth it. It's definitely a sweet commander card if you want to play with this as your commander. And just play a bunch of pump spells and then permanents that are worth it to put onto the battlefield with it.
Absolutely.
But it still costs you infinite mana sort of to do that with the exhaust ability. So
yeah. Well, in Commander, I would definitely, the way I would probably build this is with permanents that could provide stat boosts in some way. Yeah. Like that way, you know, so I don't know, maybe equipment or like enchantments that like with Anthem effects or something. It would have to be, I'm not sure exactly how you do it. But it could be a lot of fun to put together. And I have a feeling if you're clever about putting a deck together doing that, like you'll have a bunch of ramp pieces, and if you get to the point where you can full spend this and just drop a whole bunch of like 10-drop Eldrazi, and like, sure, why not? Like it's definitely sounds like fun. And this is what at the top I kind of mentioned that the set is filled with these I dare you build arounds. This is absolutely one of them. Like, how can you do this thing? I don't know, because it's very demanding, but like, how do we set that up? I don't know, but I want to find out, and I'm looking forward to trying. Yeah.
And speaking about I Dare You build arounds,
Mm-hmm.
the card I was just waiting for them to spoil because, as you're an MTG ambassador for
Yep.
this set, and I was in Foundations, and Wizards seem to send us some product in advance to open, but we can't talk about it
No.
until it's revealed.
Mm-hmm.
But the Mimeoplasm Revered
Dude.
One was finally revealed, and after seeing that card, I'm like, please, this is the card I need to see.
Yep.
Because I have a bunch of very strong feelings on this card, and why I think it is not only standard playable, but also a really sweet commander card. So Mimeoplasm, the Revered One, costs Sultai colors, so black, green, blue, and X for a 0/0. As Mimeoplasm enters, you exile up to X creature cards from your graveyard. It enters with 3+1/+1 counters on it for each creature card entered this way. And then you can pay 2 to make it a copy of target creature card exiled with it, except it's a 0/0 and has this ability. We haven't seen Mimeoplasm since it was originally printed back in the original Commander decks. And
Yep.
Mimeoplasm as a commander, super good, super fun to play.
Oh, it's an
super fun to play around.
institution. I mean, if you're gonna
Yeah.
build Sultai, it's one of the premier options. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Always has been. It's great. Yeah.
And so this one is interesting because you can pay 5 mana, right? You can make X equal 2, and you can immediately get a 6/6 for 5 mana. That can become a copy of one of those creatures that you've exiled, right? So, you can build a graveyard strategy-based deck with this. What comes to mind is the powerful Overlord in terms of Overlord of Baelmerk, right? Being able to fill your graveyard for 2 mana. You can find a Mimeoplasm off of it and put it in your hand. You can play this maybe in a Sultai Insidious Roots deck because it pulls creatures from the yard, which triggers your Insidious Roots, and then your Insidious Roots creatures, your plant tokens, tap for mana that can instantly make this copies of creatures that it has exiled, right? So I think the possibilities are kind of endless with this. And listen, Standard does have a fantastic graveyard hate. Ghost Vacuum and Rest in Peace come to mind, amongst others. That will never go away, so that really shouldn't dissuade people from creating graveyard base decks. Hey, Aberrant Oculus is one of the top decks that exists in Standard, and they don't just lose to Rest in Peace or don't just lose to Ghost Vacuum. So, I think this is playable. I'm interested to try a couple different builds with Mimeoplasm. And I'm going to build a commander deck around it too, because, in time for MagicCon Chicago, because I think it's one of the sweetest cards that are in this set.
I love it.
Don't ask me what the Mimeoplasm is doing in the Death Race. That I can't tell you. But I will. Go ahead.
I have a theory on that. But yeah.
Yes, please.
So, if I'm not mistaken, I have not done any research on the Mimeoplasm, so there may be little lore tidbits that have come up in interviews and discussions that maybe I'm behind the times on this. But in the original Mimeoplasm artwork, we very clearly see a T-Rex being part of its body, right? So and in the new art, we see a lot of dinosaurs that it's clearly sucking up, right?
Yeah.
And so my theory on this is that the Mimeoplasm is from Muraganda, which is a plane that we know very little about, except it has dinosaurs. That's the one thing that we are confident of with Muraganda, right? We know a couple other things now, but because we've raced through it quickly. We know Bloodghast is apparently vampire spirits exist on Muraganda. I don't know how that works, but we get Bloodghast in Standard. Let's go. But so if Mimeoplasm is from Muraganda, this gives us an opportunity to it wasn't in the race. It just happened to be chilling at the side of the road when they blasted by, and and it's as an excuse we get to have it here, which is great. So yeah, my guess is it's from Muraganda and they have oozes there. But all the things you're mentioning, I absolutely adore. The thing that I think is fantastic about this, well, I love everything about this, if I'm completely honest with you. It has counters, it cares about that, and it can become copies of anything. And so if you're very creative with your deck building, you can get weird with this. Because just at a very fundamental level, right? Like, let's say that you have a couple of reanimation spells and some other things, and so you have an Atrax in your deck. Which, funnily enough, this becoming a copy of Atrax is actually kind of lame because you don't get the ETB, but you get all those sweet, sweet keywords. And so, like, okay, my pre-combat main phase, I'm gonna have my 6/6 Mimeoplasm or my 9/9 Mimeoplasm become a copy of Atraxa. Well, I now have Vigilance, so I'm going to choose to attack with it. Okay, cool. And now, oh, you're going to block with something? Great. I'm going to go ahead and pay 2, and I'm going to have it become a copy of something that has trample. That, and now all of a sudden I'm crashing in, for additional damage. Or you can have it become a copy of something with double strike after the fact. You could have it become a copy of the Overlord of the Baelmerk, get the attack trigger, and then have it shift into something that's more powerful, with double strike or whatever. Like, it's nuts. The instant speed ability to just turn it into something else is wild to me. And now I find myself wondering, oh, we do have at least one creature in Standard that has hexproof. Just saying. So, yeah.
You really could make this a copy of, speaking of, like, the graveyard-based strategies. If you mill Valgavoth with this, you could pay 2 mana and turn this thing into a Valgavoth that has additional +1/+1 counters on it, and you're probably not getting rid of it.
Yup.
And you can do that on turn 4, right? Because right now we can cast Zombify for 4 mana to reanimate it.
Yep.
So, if you get good mills, whether that's off of, like, Overlord of the Baelmerk or otherwise, and you mill that, it now gives you Zombify 5 through 8 in your deck that you could just pay 4 mana, exile Valgavoth. If Mimeoplasm lives a turn, you can pay 2 mana, turn it into the Valgavoth that has 3 +1/+1 counters on it.
Yeah, that's incredible. Now, I do want to make one call out when it comes to that, because this is a rules interaction that will come up, and so I want to make sure that you guys know. So Valgavoth has... Valgavoth has a ward effect. Ward sacrifice 3 non-land permanents. Ward triggers when it becomes targeted. If you have a Mimeoplasm that has a Valgavoth exiled with it, and your opponent targets it with like a Go for the Throat or something, and then you pay 2 and turn it into Valgavoth, the ward is irrelevant. We have moved past the point where the ward would have triggered. And so I want to call that out. If you have it turn into like... I believe it's what is it? If you have it turned into, say, a Sabai Cryptomancer or Cyber Cryptomancer, then it gets hexproof. Right. Well, when Go for the Throat resolves, it will check to make sure the target is still eligible, which it isn't then. And so this will prevent a Go for the Throat from killing Mimeoplasm, whereas Valgavoth's ward will not. So that's just a rules interaction I want to call out. Ward and hexproof behave fundamentally differently in that regard. So if you want to dodge that kind of removal, you have to turn it into Valgavoth before it gets targeted, which will be tricky to do. So, So just be aware of that. But all of Valgavoth's other things it's got going on are still fantastic and absolutely worth it. But,
you mentioned, like, gobbling up some dinosaurs, and so, if you happen to have the Japan Showcase version of Mimeoplasm up on your screen, and I know that, I happen to pull, like, one of those copies when I was doing some pack opening videos that are soon to be released. Look at that little...
I got a Japanese one, which I'm very excited about. Yeah. Anyway.
Look at that little dino that's getting, like, destroyed.
It is moments before the worst day of that dino. It is the worst day of that dino's life, man. It is, woof.
It was just a little vanilla dino with no abilities at all.
Yeah. Oh, poor guy. Yeah. Yeah, it's so good. I freaking adore this treatment. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh,
and speaking about dinos, there are dinos in this set.
There are dinosaurs in this set.
And they do interact really well with your Ixalan dinosaurs. The first one I kind of want to talk about is the Dinosaur Lord.
The Regal Imperiosaur?
3 mana. Yeah, Regal Imperiosaur. So this card is a colorless and 2 green. It's a 5/4, so notably doesn't get wrecked by cut down. And it says other dinosaurs you control get +1/+1. Now, you might think to yourself, why is that relevant? Right? Because your dinos are typically big as it is, right?
Yeah.
And the answer is it's relevant because of some other particular red removal spells. So, for example, Palani's Hatcher from Lost Caverns of Ixalan
Mm-hmm.
happens to be a 5/3. So it dies to cards like Torch the Tower Bargained, or Scorching Dragonfire, or Braid, right? So if you happen to land a Regal Imperiosaur and then Palani's Hatcher, your Palani's Hatcher no longer dies to those cards.
Mm-hmm.
And the egg tokens transform into 4/4 dinosaurs instead of 3/3s with haste. So that's
Well,
relevant to have a really aggressive kind of deck.
and the egg itself wouldn't it be a 1/2 with haste?
Would be a 1/2 with haste. Yeah, that's true.
That's just fun. Anyway.
Um, so it has those pretty sweet interactions, and a question you might give is like, don't you already have Pugnacious Hammerskull? That's a 6/6 that also costs 3 mana. The answer is yes, but there's a downside to that card, right? If you
Mm-hmm.
don't have another dinosaur, it taps and gets the stun counter, which means you can't do anything with it for an entire turn. And that is relevant largely because if you can play these cards on turn 2, so Lanor Elves or the Lore Keeper from Ixalan get you both of these dinosaurs on turn 2, right? I think just the one being able to give the buff is just slightly better. It's also a 5/4, so it doesn't die to any of those cards either. And if your opponent doesn't bolt the bird, or the elf, or the Lore Keeper in this case, you get a pretty strong 5/4, which essentially blocks everything.
Yeah.
And is a pretty aggressive attacker, meaning you could attack with this Imperiosaur into a Shieldred and trade with it. Talking 2 turns before someone might land a Shieldred on the battlefield. So it's kind of relevant in my mind.
Absolutely.
So I look forward to like making more of an aggressive like dinosaur deck with this card for that reason. And it's interesting because we've also seen another really good dinosaur in this set that happens to cost 5 mana. That is
Agonasaur, I think.
Rex.
Agonasaur Rex. Yeah.
Yeah. So this one's a 5 mana cost, 3/2 green for an 8/8 trample. Solid
So there
stats.
must Okay, with the stats like that, there's got to be a downside, right? So what's the downside on this card? Come on.
None. You can also cycle it for 2 and a green, right, to draw a card. And it says when you cycle this card, put 2 +1/+1 counters on up to one target creature or vehicle. It gains trample and indestructible till end of turn. So it's a green dino that also serves as a combat trick and draws you a card for 3 mana. Aside from just only costing 5 to cast for a solid
That's
8/8.
nuts. That's so silly. Yeah. No,
Like
and this card is
imagine
wild.
having Palani's Hatcher into casting this, then getting a 9/9 trample haste to just swing in after.
Dude.
These cards
And
are very good.
It's so funny because I look at cards like this and I think my immediate gut reaction as somebody who started playing this game 20 years ago is this is absurd. The power level on these cards is pushed to the limit beyond belief. I can't believe that that you would get that many stats for such a low cost. But then I think back to the last 2 years, 3 years, like ever since Adventures in the Forgotten Realm and Kaldheim rotated, ever since we lost Old Growth Troll, green hasn't been particularly strong in standard, and it just hasn't been consistently. And the idea of having creatures that are just a little bit bigger than everybody else's creatures, isn't good enough.
Yeah.
If the stats being more is going to be the value proposition in a world where we have so many ways to just one shot burn stuff, and we have 1-drops and 2-drops for 2 mana being, swinging for 8 and 9 damage in red decks right now. Like, if stats are going to be the value, you got to get a lot of them for a very little amount of mana. And so that's what they're doing here. And I think it's going to put green in a position where it probably won't be noticeably better against a lot of the white or black decks that we see. But against those red decks, watch out. That's really cool.
What's the Gruul deck going to do against an 8/8 trample?
Smash into it and
And thinking about just what those decks do, like we really haven't seen dinosaurs do anything in standard outside of when
No.
Ixalan came out.
Mm-hmm.
But think about it. Like you obviously can play your turn one dork. If your opponent does nothing, you get that 5/4 or the
Mm-hmm.
6/6 the next turn.
Yep.
Turn three, you get Hulking Raptor. So Hulking Raptor from Ixalan is a 5/3 for 4 mana with Ward and adds 2 green during your pre-combat main. So immediately the next turn you slam this 5/5, this 8/8 on the board for 5 mana. Or you slam another small dino and have your cycle ability up to protect your
Mm-hmm.
dinos or other creatures that are on the battlefield. You pump their power toughness, you give them indestructible and trample to end a turn, and you're having a good time.
My
Um,
goodness, yes. Yeah.
I think that these are cards that the dinosaur deck was missing early on. I was surprised there was no real dinosaur lord in Lost Caverns of Ixalan when that set came
Mm-hmm.
out. Lost Caverns of Ixalan will remain in standard when it rotates in September, so you will still be able to play these types of decks. Um, I'm ready to brew some strong
Mm-hmm.
red green dino stuff.
Oh my goodness, yes.
You could have even just ignore the red cards outside of Polani's Hatcher. Build
Mm-hmm.
like a Golgari deck if you really want some extra removal. I heard Over the Lord of the Hauntwoods is still pretty good in terms of ramping.
Yep.
Um, it. I'm ready for it. You are correct in that the white black decks will probably still like trample, no pun intended, all over the
Right.
dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Sunfall will still exist. We'll talk about the new Wrath spell in just a minute.
Yep.
Um, that will always exist in those colors or those color combinations. Um,
But the other thing about that though is the amount of power that these creatures are bringing to the table. It's enough that like the clock is fast enough so that
yeah.
those decks will have fewer turns to dig, which I think is really important. So,
Mhm.
maybe it will make a significant difference. I'm not sure. We'll time will tell. But
Yeah.
but I don't know if we're gonna do green. This is what it needs to look like in 2025, and I'm very excited. Yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, we have the Lore Keeper and Llanowar Elves at the same time. So the 3 drops, your 3 drops like the Regal Imperiosaur or Pug Skull, those are gonna be turned to often, and
Yeah.
we still have Gishath. So if you're wondering what are we trying to ramp to, I mean Gishath is still legal, you guys.
Yeah.
So having primarily green with, red splashes and a white splash for Gishath at the top. That sounds
Mhm.
fantastic in my book. I'm definitely, and that's one of those where if we get paired up on the ladder and you run me over with this, fair play, good game.
Yeah.
Like,
I can't be mad.
nope. Yeah, I'm okay
Yeah.
with getting run over by this all day, and I hope this does invigorate, green stompy aggro in standard. I really hope so.
Mhm.
I think they've got the tools now. It'll be interesting
Yeah.
to see how it plays. Yeah, good stuff. So
Um,
you mentioned the board wipe.
yeah.
I feel like it would be a worthy segue here. So unfortunately on Scryfall, the only one that we have access to right now is foreign language. I believe this is Japanese.
Yep.
So we don't have the English version to show, but we can read it off for you. It's called Spectacular Pileup, which is 3 white for sorcery. Destroy all creatures and vehicles. Or no, sorry. All creatures and vehicles lose indestructible until end of turn. Destroy all creatures and all vehicles. And it also has cycling too.
Yeah.
So in a Sunfall world, how much do we like this?
Well, Sunfall is clearly better than this card for
Sure.
now. Sunfall rotate in September.
Not soon enough, but in September, yes.
Yeah, and I think the exile effect is just stronger. Sunfall is stronger too
Yeah.
because you generate a token after the fact.
Yep.
Somebody had said to me when they saw this card, "Oh, this kills Thrun," and I'm like, "Yeah, but at the same time,
I mean, sure.
when Sunfall rotates out, so does Thrun. So it's like, what else are we caring about making lose indestructible for the time being? That said, it is strong just for the fact that it does that for 3
Mm-hmm.
white. I love the fact that this Wrath spell has cycling as making it pretty powerful.
Yes.
Because sometimes you have those hands where you're just stuck with like my Sunfall players will know this. When you have all of your Sunfalls in your hand and you're like, I don't want all of these. I want like 2 of them. I wish I could just discard this card and draw another one. Well, you can do that with this card.
Yep.
So that's pretty nice. I expect this card to see play, but I think after Sunfall rotates.
Yep, I think you're right. Yeah, and the fact that it strips indestructible, yeah, okay, Thrun is one example, and that's fine. Although Thrun is only indestructible on your turn, so being wiped on the other side would still hit it. Yeah. So, it's one of those where I don't know how useful that is. It's going to catch a lot of people off guard if they're running, protection spells, or if they're cycling, their Agonasaur in the hopes of keeping it alive. Like, tough luck, sorry. Although I'm not, I'm wiping your board. I guess you got to deal with it. But, and so it's one of those where it's not as, I think that's, I don't know how impactful that will be right now, but it's nice that it's there. I'm glad that that's an option. I think the big thing here is the cycling, like you said. I completely agree with that. Because, when you have 2 split ups and a Day of Judgment and a Sunfall in your hand, what am I going to do with all these? Cycle one of them. But it also hits vehicles. And that's an element that I think right now in Standard, there are very few vehicles that are actually getting any meaningful play. But obviously, Aetherdrift is just chock full of them, and full of like pilots and other creatures that crew vehicles well. So I don't know if there are any good utility vehicles that really step up and become meta. Being able to blow them up with this is potentially quite nice. One vehicle that I'm aware of right now that I want to be running alongside a lot of these Aetherdrift cards is the hover ship from Duskmourn. The unidentified. The unidentified. Hover ship. That's the one. Yeah. So this thing, it's like a Banishing Light or like an O-Ring style effect. It exiles a creature with toughness 5 or less, and it itself is a vehicle. And so you could theoretically turn this sideways as a flyer later in the game. And if you have other things that care about vehicles, like Tune-Up, we were talking about earlier, it can reanimate an Oblivion Ring. And, you have so many things that can benefit from vehicles, like little utility pieces like this, which right now aren't great and don't really see a home. Maybe there's an opportunity for, cards like this to get boosted with some of these vehicle synergies. Well, if that becomes relevant, the pileup is an answer to it. Spectacular pileup is a check on that, and it's a 5 mana sweeper, so it's not like it's super easy to get to, consistently. But if you're running a control deck, having a sweeper that can hit a lot of stuff. Also, comparing this to Sunfall, the design on this, I think, is just significantly it's less problematic, let's say. Sunfall and White Sun's Twilight, those kind of cards, the sweepers that leave stuff behind, is kind of a design space that I'm hoping we don't go back to with any meaningful significance or with any meaningful regularity, because they produce really unpleasant play patterns. Like famously there was a deck list making the rounds a while back that was literally just like 26 lands and 34 wraths, and it worked.
I remember that.
And it's like, that should never be a thing. That should never be viable.
I don't want to sit down for an hour game.
No, hard pass on that. Like, I don't want creatures to not be viable because a control deck can have the sweepers be its finishers. Like, I don't like that. I'm not saying, like, good control decks still had other finishers, but you had plenty of people who were just like, I'll get to White Sun's Twilight, it'll be fine. And it did work sometimes, and those matches took forever. So give me sweepers that are decent, that do a ton of things, and one of them is not create a threat. I like that. I think that's great. So I like the design of this card a lot, and I want to play in a Standard where this is the best sweeper we have. I think that sounds awesome. Right. And we might get there after rotation. So fingers crossed. Yeah. Good stuff. So what else do you want to chat about? We have quite a few. And we're already an hour into this discussion.
Yeah, let's talk about a few more.
Absolutely.
Number one, I think we should touch on like the Gear Hulk cycle.
Yeah.
This set, it was spoiled in Marrow's teaser, was a cycle of allied Gear Hulks. I'm sorry. I don't think he said allied colored Gear Hulks. He just said multicolored Gear Hulks, but they happen to all be allied colored, meaning like blue-white or green-red or blue-black. What else have we seen? We haven't seen the Rakdos one, red-black.
And I think we've seen the Gruul one.
And the Gruul one, yep.
Yeah, green red. Right. Yeah.
Some of these are clearly more powerful than others. I'm sure it was designed that way. the one I think that is the strongest. So also listener and viewer, we have not seen what the Rakdos Gear Hulk is
Correct.
yet on this recording. So in case you're watching this later, we don't know what it is. So up until this point, my belief is that the strongest Gear Hulk that they've spoiled so far is the Oil Deep Gear Hulk, which is the Dimir one. So for double blue and double black, you get a 4/4 with lifelink and ward 1. And then when this creature enters, you look at target player's hand, you may choose a card from it, and if you do, that player discards that card, then draws a card. So this is pretty similar to Vendilion Click in the past for my OG Magic players who remember the Lorwyn series. And it's interesting because you can choose yourself. So let's say you happen to cast the Oil Deep Gear Hulk, and you've got only basic lands in hand, Arena Shuffler. I might be able to choose the basic land I have in my hand and discard it and draw a new card. And because it's an enter the battlefield effect, that means you can do it whenever it enters. Why is that relevant? There's cards like This Town Ain't Big Enough that are running amok across Standard right now in multiple strategies, taking advantage of like Storm Chaser's talent from Bloomburrow. This Town Ain't Big Enough. Picking up things, putting them back down. Picking up things, putting them back down. And this is a card you certainly can do that with. You can even attack with your 4/4 life-linked Gear Hulk, which is pretty relevant. And then you can cast the Fear of Isolation 2/3, and that is a cast thing. So you have to pick up the Gear Hulk. So it's not like a ability you can respond to. So here, let me put down this 2/3 and pick my 4/4 back up and replay my 4/4 and Vendilion Click again. Or it's just a good way to get your creature to be untapped in this regard, especially if you're playing against an aggressive deck. This deck's got to work some house against the Gruul deck that's out there in red-based strategies. It's just very strong, in my opinion. And it can't die to go for the throat either, because it's an artifact.
It dodges Go for the Throat, Cut Down, and Anoint with Affliction. Like, so many key pieces of removal just don't touch this thing. Yeah.
In my opinion, because there are a whole lot of artifacts in the set, and I'm sure folks are going to be trying out multiple artifacts from these sets. Again, my comment might be based because my preview card in Outlaws of Thunder Junction was Shoot the Sheriff. So we probably should be playing more Shoot the Sheriff in Standard.
We absolutely should. I completely agree. Yep.
Matter of fact, I was at my LGS playing Modern the other night when I stopped by, and the Dimir Murktide deck played Shoot the Sheriff against me, and I looked across at my opponent and I said, "How dare you?" And you know what it killed? My Scion of Draco.
Ooh.
So
it's a good. It's just that good as far as that removal goes. It's just that clean. Yeah.
So this is my favorite out of the bunch of Gear Hulks that they have spoiled so far.
Yeah.
I think the card's very strong, very playable.
100%. I completely agree with every single thing you just said. I think it's going to line up really, really nicely. Also, that showcase art is definitely something straight out of straight out of some Gundam series. I love it. It's absolutely amazing. I do think Oil Deep Gear Hulk is probably the strongest that we've seen so far. It's just, it is a 4-drop, and so it's probably going to be the curve top. Yeah! It's probably going to be the top of the curve for whatever deck it's in. I can't imagine a lot of, I don't know. There are plenty of cards or plenty of decks that you're never going to think about this with. But right now, Dimir Blinky nonsense where ETBs are relevant and you want to be getting into combat, like how many of those are there? And right now, like in the Dimir mid-range deck, if you're running Kaito, Enduring Curiosity, all that jazz, how many times do you put them in a position where it's board wipe or bust? And yes, you have access to cards like Duress, right? So the ability to monkey with their hand and prevent that board wipe from going off is there. But to do that while also moving forward with, by putting more power on the board to help with any kind of, races that they might be putting you under, I think this card is actually going to play very well. It doesn't look like too much, if we're honest. But it's got all the right stats in all the right places, Yeah. I like it a lot. One of the other ones that I think we should touch on, because I bet a lot of people, when you said what do you think is going to be the strongest, probably thought you might have been thinking about the Riptide Gear Hulk, which is the Azorius one. So this one, I want to touch on it because it does look impactful, compared to some of the other ones we've seen. So this is a 2/5 with double strike for 1 white, white, blue, blue, and it has prowess. So prowess and double strike is a scary keyword combo, to be fair. And when this creature enters, for each opponent, put up to 1 target non-land permanent that player controls into its owner's library, third from the top. So it's the Teferi Hero of Dominaria Tuck on an ETB.
That's Oust, baby.
Oh,
Y'all
Oust,
remember
of course.
Oust back in the day? I mean, granted, Oust only hit creature, but
yeah,
ousting some non-land permanents.
I think this is going to be a bear and very frustrating to play against, I think is the main feeling. There will be somebody out here on day one living the Elish Norn dream with this and was it Fortune that blinks at the stuff on?
Yeah.
That will happen, and it is going to be a nightmare when that happens. But I feel like that setup is very difficult to execute. So if you got it, you earned it. Yeah.
I think this card goes in Blue-White Simulacrum Synthesizer deck because it triggers that, and then you get to oust your opponent's threat away.
Yep.
Also, this card works incredibly well with this town ain't big enough. I mean, imagine just picking up and putting this thing down every turn after you attacked with a 2/5 double strike prowess.
Why though? That's so mean. Oh, I love it.
Crazy.
This is.
I agree
bonkers.
with you. This card is bonkers.
Yeah.
I am not saying that any card in Standard deserves to be banned. If a card ends up getting axed from the format, I'm pretty sure it's this town ain't big enough. And it's going to take them a while to understand it. And I think it would be acceptable because it's an uncommon and it eliminates one type of strategy. Again, I'm not saying Standard deserves a ban, but if you keep printing cards that work incredibly well with that particular strategy, I don't know. I'm not saying it's overbearing. I'm not saying that the thing can't be dealt with. It totally can. But the more cards you build, that you print to interact with this, and making it only cost 2 mana for me to be able to bounce one of yours and one of mine, and I can keep rebuying this from the yard.
Yeah.
It's a little monk at TOS.
Yeah, this town ain't big enough is definitely. It's funny because the one that I think of as being kind of problematic is Up the Beanstalk, but that's come to think of it, seems to be more powerful and more popular now. It's always been a thing, it's always been a factor, but this town triggering it is the way that I see it go off a lot these days, and I've abused it too. And honestly, when you have this town, this town and the Storm Chaser's talent combo is nuts. It's insanely powerful. And so, add Riptide into the mix. Sure, why not? Riptide Geralt can start ousting stuff as you go. It's the potential is pretty nuts. 5 mana to oust a thing. I mean, you are putting your opponent down on cards, and you're not even doing them the courtesy of putting it in their graveyard.
Right.
It's brutal. Oh.
Yeah, it just tempos them. I mean, essentially, it time walks them a turn, 3 turns later. Right? I mean, there's ways that obviously that people can just draw cards, but it's the inconvenience of putting it there, not putting it back in your opponent's hand, to just simply be recast the next turn. That's kind of pretty good. Yeah.
It is pretty darn nasty. And this showcase art is also absolutely stunning, so I definitely need to call it out. My goodness. If you're listening on audio, I highly recommend pulling up Scryfall and looking at the showcase art for Riptide Gearhulk. It looks like it's made out of pure crystal, and it has a lot of really sharp angles and edges on it that is just really... It's beautiful. I have no doubt holding that in person would be nice, especially in foil. Yeah. My goodness. Anyway, it's pretty.
It is very pretty.
One deck that you mentioned, the Simulacrum Synthesizer deck. My goodness, absolutely. There's another card that was actually one of the earlier spoilers, but I don't think we've talked about it on this channel yet.
Yeah.
during one of the first days of spoiler season, and I think it will work very well in the Simulacrum Synthesizer deck as well as, a ton of different artifact decks. And the moment you mentioned that, I realized that Riptide Gearhulk would be a disgusting 5-drop for this deck. Repurposing Bay.
Ah, yes.
Now this is pod racing. So Repurposing Bay is an artifact for 2 and a blue. With pay 2 tap, sacrifice another artifact, search your library for an artifact card with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrificed artifact mana value, put it onto the battlefield and shuffle. It's Birthing Pod, but for artifacts. Do I need to say more?
No.
I feel like that sums it up, right?
I will tell you, so of course y'all will have our links at the bottom of this video.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're officially able to release Aetherdrift, like pack opening content, this was like the first card I think I opened out of a pack. And I was like, there's no way they actually printed an artifact birthing pod. And in standard, no less. I mean, granted, probably better in older formats because you have different artifacts that you can essentially pod out. And I had to read the card a few times just to make sure that this card was, in fact, birthing pod.
But and for real, yep.
It's birthing pod.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I agree with you, right? If I'm playing this in the blue-white deck, so this is because we just talked about the Gearhulk maybe being playable in this deck, and I play clay-fired bricks on 2, go get a plains, right? I can set up, turns where I can pod out that clay-fire bricks on 2 and go search for Simulacrum Synthesizer and just put it on the battlefield. So I don't even got to start the game with it, nope. Right? And obviously in the same type of deck, you can play cards like Thran Spider that give you power stones, right? To help you pay the cost of Repurposing Bay. Mm-hmm. It's very good. This card is very good. And honestly, I think people are going to start to need to play artifact removal in standard again. We haven't had to in quite some time, right? So, like, even though a braid was printed in Foundation, so we'll have a braid for at least 5 years, we haven't had to play it because your deal damage to creature and exile it spells like Scorching Dragonfire are just better against the creatures that are in standard right now. But if people start playing cards like this and Simulacrum Synthesizer, you're going to need to put a braid in your board. Or Disenchant for the white players. Or Exercise, which exiles artifacts too.
Untimely Malfunction is another one. And there are tons of them, but they're not seeing play right now. So the tools are there. Like, I'm not worried about this card being problematic, but it could be strong enough that you need to answer it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And so, 100%. This card is very good, and I'll be excited to see what folks are potting into, even outside of Simulacrum Synthesizer. Like, that's a given. But what 4-drop can you sack to go get the 5-drop Gearhulk and then oust an opponent's non-land permanent?
The last 2 Gearhulks we just talked about, Oil Deep Gearhulk is a 4-drop, Riptide Gearhulk is a 5-drop. So we have those kind of lines. And the other card that I see with Repurposing Bay that honestly I've been starting to use it more and more in a couple of my brews, even before Aetherdrift, but Enigma Jewel is a card that I'm coming around to big time because the number of abilities that are on cards that, a lot of times they're just a little too expensive to use. Well, the moment you can pay for them consistently, so Enigma Jewel on 1 and Collector's Vault on 2 is one of my favorite starts now, for obvious reasons. Now, if you can add a Repurposing Bay on 3 with the Enigma Jewel there to activate it and be able to sack the Collector's Vault to go grab a 3-drop like a Simulacrum Synthesizer, you could have a turn 3 Repurposing Bay into Sin with an Enigma Jewel back to go grab exactly you're shaking your head right now. You're seeing the disgusting nonsense that we're working with.
You have Collector's Vault and clay fired bricks, so you've got 8 2-drops that you could sack
easily to fire to go into Sin, and even then we have the. We would still have the Enigma Jewel back, which we could then pod out, pod into a 2-drop if we want to, if we need to hit our land drops, go grab another Clayfire Bricks or something. The opportunities are there. And if we have, if the Collector's Vault is putting out treasures, the ability to play a 3-drop from hand and then activate the Repurposing Bay to go grab a 4-drop or, the potential sequencing and some of the lines that you're going to be able to generate with this are insane. And
Yeah.
at the 5-drop slot, we still have Mightstone Weakstone, which is just really good and it can also generate mana that can, Repurposing Bay. Also, Repurposing Bay is not legendary. I don't know if that's relevant. I'm just saying.
It is, because you can just keep playing copies of the Repurposing Bay and triggering your Simsin because it's a 3-mana artifact.
And
so
then
you
use the
can,
one
you
Bay
can
to
sack
pod the other one. And
yeah. What pods do? Have multiple pods, right? Sack your 2-drop, go get second pod. Sack first pod, go get next step up.
Sorry, I'm just getting giddy at the idea here. Like, I cannot wait. This is probably, without exaggeration, this is probably going to be my very first brew. I can't wait. Like, this thing is going to be absolutely disgusting. And of all the cards we've seen, this one I can see there being some kind of just wackadoo line that becomes problematically strong that people get sick of real quick. This is the one where I can see some mad scientist is going to break this, and it's going to be nuts. And I hope it's me, to be honest. And yeah.
You can play World Walker Helm from the big score and pay a blue and a colorless, tap, create a token copy that's a copy of target Repurposing Bay, and then pod out the the extra Repurposing Bay.
Also, Leyline Axe.
Yeah, sure.
It's a free 4-drop.
So you get this in for a free, and then you can immediately pod for 5. Yeah, sure. I'm game.
Not?
Sign me up for all of this.
Yeah, let's do all of this. It's just, yeah.
Bring out Dyna Braids, opponents.
Dude, I love this. But yeah, actually, the World Wicker Helm is also just truly fantastic. Disgusting.
Get them now, y'all, if you ain't got them. You thought Simulacrum Synthesizer was expensive before.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
I think
just because I'm curious, Simulacrum Synthesizer from the big score right now and Paper Magic you can get some for like $25 to $28. And they used to be like 50 plus.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. And I bet we might creep back up there. We'll see. Because, yeah.
World Walker Helms are basically a $4 to $6 card right now.
Okay.
Which is incredibly cheap. I think just in general, folks should be picking up the big score cards because they were hard to rip out of packs in Paper Magic. So you had a better chance to rip them out of collector booster packs than you did regular booster packs, which is why a lot of them were very high in price. Thinking about, like, at one point, you had Vaultborn Tyrant that was like $50 some, and it's not even really standard playable, but it's a very, very powerful card.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Speaking of very powerful cards.
Oh yeah.
That are also artifacts. I think we should end this episode by talking about the Radiant Lotus. Because
we have a new Lotus.
Marrow promised us a new Lotus in this set. And my god, did they give us a new Lotus that isn't legendary. Which is important to look at.
Yep.
So, Radiant Lotus for 6 colorless mana is an artifact that says tap, sacrifice 1 or more artifacts. Choose a color. Target player adds 3 mana of the chosen color for each artifact sacrificed this way. Okay? So, this could be any artifacts, right? Could be your Power Stones. It could be, let's say, a bunch of, 1 and 2 drop artifacts that maybe you could reanimate with Raise the Past, Rinse and Repeat. Who knows? It's got possibilities.
It could be a whole bunch of creatures that are running away from Yigra because those all become artifacts. The potential are here. Maybe you have, I don't know, this is very janky, but if you can't talk about it here, where can you talk about jank, right?
Right.
Like Encroaching Mycosynth turns all your permanents into artifacts. Maybe you can turn those into mana for some crazy huge Exsanguinate or Torment of Hailfire, something like that.
Oh.
Right? The other thing that I love about this is that its target player gets the mana. So in Commander, you can straight up power up one of your opponents who is trying to check one of your other opponents, but they're just shy on mana. You can be like, all right, I'm going to sack these 2 blood tokens. I have 6 more. Does that help? I love that.
What's interesting is in Commander, if you target yourself, that makes this a deflecting swap target,
Yep.
right? Change with a
People can
single
reroute
target.
it. That's
Yeah,
true.
yeah. So
Yep.
let's say you sack your board and add 50 some mana to your pool. I get deflecting swat it and add 50 mana to my pool instead, and you lost all your artifacts.
That'd be amazing. And those kind of plays are there. I love it. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah. So,
fantastic.
interesting. So I was listening to the weekly MTG stream when they were showing off these cards, because this is a recent preview as of
Hmm.
this past week, yesterday, Tuesday, and at the time of this recording.
Hmm.
And the set designers called this probably one of the most dangerous cards in the set. Um, so it's
Okay.
interesting. I don't know if that meant dangerous for standard or just like a dangerous card period in multiple formats. A lot of people are comparing this card to KCI, Clark Clan Ironworks, and how powerful that card was. That card's banned from
Okay.
Modern.
Yeah.
But you're talking about a format that has cards from 8th edition forward, right?
Hmm.
So the possibilities are more endless there, whereas this might be a balance card, let's say, in standard. Maybe, who knows? Like I said, cards get better the more cards you print that interact with them. So if it might not be powerful in Aetherdrift, and we're talking about the set that will be the youngest set in standard, so you have this for a full 3 years. If they print better cards for this, we'll be able to see the potential of it. Um,
Yeah.
I do want to ask one thing though. Can you bring up the Japanese showcase art of this,
Oh,
because
heck
it
yeah.
is so nice looking.
Ooh.
It's like Lotus on Lotus on Lotus with the Amonkhet pyramids in the background or on top of the Lotus. It is
Yeah.
so beautiful.
Yeah, that is breathtaking. And it's got that the full frame kind of Japanese treatment that we've definitely
Hmm.
seen on a number of things so far, which will always remind me of like a Pokemon GX or whatever. But that's fine.
Yeah,
Those cards are cool. I like them. I'm not,
love it.
I don't mean that as a negative thing.
Yeah,
And if I sacrifice the Radiant Lotus, I want to get 2 prize cards. So I'm okay with that.
yeah.
Um, yeah, no, it's absolutely breathtaking, and the idea that this is the most dangerous card in the set, that tracks. Because even if this doesn't make waves when it first shows up, this kind of effect, this kind of potential, is just
Yeah.
going to be lying in wait for some piece to really crack it open.
Yeah.
And there's one huge element of this card that I don't think can be one knob that they didn't turn on this that I think is borderline insane. It enters untapped. Like,
Ah, yes.
because it
Nick's Lotus enters tapped, right?
Nyx Lotus and Timeless Lotus both enter tapped.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, whereas Gilded Lotus, it costs 5, but it produces 3, and that enters untapped. Which you're still down on mana the turn it enters, so okay. But you
Yeah.
get kind of this immediate rebate with this. If you have 2 artifacts that you want to sacrifice to it, you still need to pay the 6 mana. But if you pay 6 mana, drop it, and sack 2 things, you've netted even. Which that
Yeah.
often isn't going to be worth it. But if you have 3, you're now going up to, you're going to get 9 mana in your pool. You're going to net 3 mana because you played this and sacked 3 things. And then if you have a lot
Right.
of them, my goodness, the potential
And
is
you don't have to sacrifice itself either.
no.
So you can sacrifice other artifacts and leave this for later, or you know,
And
get you with 2 other artifacts that get you 9 mana.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't even appreciate that too. Sacrifice 1 or more artifacts. It doesn't say other. You could sacrifice this if you wanted
Yeah.
to, but you don't have to. Yeah. Nutty. So, yeah, this is one of those where this is going to be a huge bomb in many cases. Yeah.
What can I play? What can I play in standard that's sick with this card?
What I'm trying to think of ways to put a lot of
Well,
artifacts.
turn one Market Gnome, turn 2 Clay Fired Bricks, turn 3 Thran Spider. Create um your Power Stone token. That's 4 artifacts in play
Yeah.
with fought 4 mana, right?
Mhm.
So you go land and What else next? Might Stone, Weak Stone, which
Yeah.
taps for mana. Then you can, the next turn, you can tap the Power Stone and the Might Stone and Weak Stone to generate that colorless mana. You can tap Radiant Lotus, sack your cheapy artifacts. You could use the ability of Thran Spider to get a new artifact, right, for 7, right?
But we still also have, like... We also...
What can I play that's the bomb, though?
I mean, Portal of Phyrexia comes to mind.
Yeah. Okay.
Cityscape Leveler is also running around, so that could be a thing.
Yeah.
One card that we have in Standard right now that that I think a lot of people forget is in Standard could be meaningful in any scenario where we have an obscene amount of mana. We have Exsanguinate. I mean, Black has the Lightning Bolt for the kill spell, like the kill shot.
Right.
In the past we've had Fireball, we've had Banefire, we've had Crackle with Power, like that kind of just, I have a ton of mana, how do I turn it into damage?
Yeah.
We have Exsanguinate from Foundations, so maybe, each opponent loses X life, you gain life equal to life lost this way, and it's X black. So if your opponent is at exactly 20 and you can generate 22 mana, all of which is black, boom, you can call it a day.
Or just play Chandra from March of the Machines and double the Exsanguinate spell.
That also is a perfectly fine option.
But, I mean, I don't know if you could play that many artifacts in that same time to have that matter.
It would be tough, but I like the idea. Yeah, there might be some there. Or maybe hit the Mother Lode to get a bunch of treasures down that could then, and the... and the Radiant Lotus turns them all into
just
3
keep
power.
hitting that Mother Lode.
Hit the Mother Lode over. Keep it going, baby. I don't know, something. There might be something there. It could be fun though. I'm definitely intrigued at the possibilities, and this card is a 6 mana artifact. Yeah. So I don't think any deck can just drop it. You have to build around it pretty aggressively, but the potential is enough that I think it's worth it. So I'm very curious to see what we find here. I'm wondering if threefold Thunderhulk in there somehow, because that makes a crap ton of little gnomes. Maybe Adam Pakal is maybe this could be a payoff in that kind of deck. I don't know, but anyway.
Gnome tokens. Jeez.
Right? Oh, this is all silly. Yeah, so
dangerous
the Radiant Lotus
is
here.
Yeah.
There are so many other cards. So we're now running. We've been going for a while, which I know for us is standard. There are so many other cards. Like right then, there's another card if you're going wide in green that we could talk about. But Martian World Ooze. It rules. Go check it out.
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry. I know we were meant to be done with the Lotus.
I said I wanted to talk about this card too.
But if you're going
this card is very strong, y'all.
If
I had to pick another really strong card in this set, it's the one that turns my 1/1s into 6/6s.
That seems good.
So, my little gnome tokens can become 6/6 oozes.
Yep, and then whenever an opponent casts a spell, if it's not their turn, you just rock out a 3/3 elephant, just because. Anyway, so it is a very powerful enchantment. It's very fun, very silly. Go check it out. But we are going to go ahead and bring this in for a landing. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us. There are so many more spoilers. We will definitely be talking more spoilers next week. And if you have any questions about specific cards that you've seen and you want to get our impressions, hit those links in the description. They actually do link to our Twitch channels where we stream live, and you can actually have conversations with us about these. So we would love to keep the conversation going. If there was any card that's been spoiled that you didn't see or that we didn't talk about today, please come chat with us and ask, or leave a comment, down below, or reach out on our Discord. Any of those places would be a great way to get in touch with us. We'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on these cards, as well as ones that you're exceptionally excited for. Also, if you're looking to get your hands on elephant tokens, I actually will be handing those out at MagicCon Chicago, which is coming up.
Perfect
There's
timing.
also going to be a streamer event for Aetherdrift on the 5th. So, keep an eye out on all of our channels for more information on that, because we're very excited. It's going to be a ton of fun.
Especially if you want to see Hamhawks and I battle against each other. Undoubtedly, that will happen.
It will. It has happened.
Streamer event.
It has happened every streamer event so far, and I'm looking forward to it happening this time around. Yeah. And I also definitely, another one that I'm gonna brew around quite a bit that I didn't mention at all on the stream today is Gas Guzzler. I definitely am looking forward to this one. because I actually got my hands on a preview card. So this past Monday, I got to show off Gas Guzzler, which somebody immediately pointed out that it looks the art looks shockingly like Ben Stiller, and I can't unsee that. So thank you everybody for that. One Drop Vampire, it's also very good. And if you want more information on that, you can watch my YouTube video where I sell it to Piggy Banks, who bought it emphatically. It was great. Yeah. So thank you, everybody. Carlo, thank you very much. Is there any kind of closing thoughts that you want to leave the people with before we head out?
No, just come check out all of the awesome Aetherdrift content that's coming. Again, you'll see Hamhawks and I at MagicCon Chicago. We will have a meet and greet the Saturday of MagicCon Chicago at 5 p.m. Central Time. Yeah, Central Time in Chicago.
Yes.
So make sure to come by and see us. I will have lots of Luna tokens and stickers to hand out for y'all. It'll be a good time right at Creator Central. And then if you wanted to come play Standard with me, my buddy Celtic Warrior Games is actually hosting in Creator Central a Learn to Play Standard event.
Excellent.
On Friday. So if you stop by Creator Central, we'll help teach you how to jump into Standard.
So what you're saying is I need to bring my Insidious Roots deck and just turn all the people off to Standard.
Correct. Yes.
Who are there? Okay, great.
Yes.
Awesome. Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, dear listener. We do appreciate it. Please like, subscribe, do the things, and we will catch you on the next one. Carlo, thank you as always. Great time.
Oh, anytime.
All right. Later, everybody.
Later.